Well, I was going to title this Summer on the Rocks with apologies to Charlie Kidder because I kind of cribbed his the title of one of his talks for this. Chris makes me give him Plantsman Stores talks like months in advance, so I have a hard time thinking when I'm put on the spot. But Charlie is our garden leader for some of the areas that we're going to be talking about, so I'm sure he's going to be chipping in and have things to say with me as well. But as always, I welcome any comments, discussion, certainly questions, but also any experiences y'all have had with any of these plants that we talk about. We're going to be talking about plants in our dry gardens, the Xeric Garden, the Rooftop, the Scree Garden. And so these are generally specialized plants. Unless I say otherwise, all these plants really want a well-drained soil, which is why we have them out there. Unless I say otherwise, they're also fairly drought tolerant. So that'll be just a given with this. There's a lot of adaptations for these dryland plants, and we've been experimenting with them for several years now, really trying a lot of them. Now, JC did a southwestern garden here many years ago, and his philosophy was stick it in the red clay, see what survives. And we know now there's some yuccas that will survive. There are some of the prickly pears, the opuntias that will survive, but a lot of the other plants won't. We've changed our philosophy a little bit. We don't mind giving plants a little bit better environment to grow in. Allows us to grow a few more plants, and we really tell people they should be amending their soils just in their regular beds. You should add amendments. You should make the soil a little bit nicer. That's what is going to be best for your plants. So we're practicing what we preach. And then in the specialized gardens, we like to talk about how we have what we do to have gardens like that, and we want to encourage people to do some of these specialized gardens, whether they're bog gardens or dry gardens. It's just takes a little bit extra work on the front end, but it really pays off with being able to grow a greater diversity of plants. So we'll talk about them. I'll also talk about the plants, some of the plants that are up here that you can do in more typical garden situations as well. So we'll go ahead and get out there and we'll start talking about the areas and some of the adaptations as well as the individual plants up there. So we're gonna start on the rooftop, so we can just all head over and meet up there. All right. Next plant is this flame acanthus. Not really an acanthus. Not sure why it gets that name, but Acanthus quadriphytus variety wrightii. This is a Mexican shrub. It's a spreading shrub. You can see it popping up a ways away. Really likes this very well-drained soil because it can move easily through this. Naturally grows in very rocky areas, dry rocky areas, but this is one of the more adaptable shrubs that we have, plants that we have on the list, where it will take good garden soil. It doesn't want to be straight in red clay, although it probably has a better chance of surviving than most other plants, even in just straight Carolina clay. But if you have a nice soil, amended soil, this will do just fine in a sunny spot. Real nice texture, real nice form for contrasting with other shrubs and other perennials. Very upright branching, real small leaves that give it a fine texture, and then long seasons of these kind of orange-red tubular flowers, which are hummingbird magnets. Hummingbirds absolutely love these things. They're perfect for them. They sit upright. They keep flowering a lot over the summer. This summer's been especially nice because it flowers kind of early summer, but then like a lot of these dryland plants, when it flowers, when it rains, it will tend to put out a new flush of flowers. So since we've had plenty of rain this summer, we're getting pretty good steady flowers all season long. During the winter, it can be a little bit twiggy. It can be cut back hard during the winter. A lot of these plants from dryland habitats, I like to leave up before pruning them back, just because sometimes the winter wet can be a problem, and when you cut them back, they tend to have a little bit more rot issues down at the base. This probably less than a lot of them, but still I would leave this up, just leave the kind of twiggy end up. And then when it flushes out, sometimes it won't flush out at the top. You can either cut it all the way back, or you can just give it kind of a haircut and cut it about halfway back and let it all flush out from there. But it is nice. A lot of these kind of upright plants will get bare towards the bottom, but this does a good job of staying full all the way down to the base. Like I said, it will sucker around, which is great if you got it in a place where you want it to do that. If it's coming up through the middle of an opuntia that you have to get out, sometimes not so nice. Especially here on the rooftop where we can't jam a shovel down in there and dig it out. We have to be a little more careful because we have a liner underneath there so that Chris isn't sitting underwater in his office. Questions about the flame acanthus, sometimes called Mexican flame, or it's got about 8 different names.
Not about the plant, but I just want to get straight in my mind how you build one of these gardens. I know you said it goes up to 18 inches. So first, after you have that depth established, you stick in your filtered sieved topsoil, and then on top the screed. But
okay.
How much?
Well, with a rooftop like this, what you have the rooftop, the structural portion of the rooftop, then a impermeable layer, a rubber mat, something like that, an impermeable layer, with a large roof system like this. You put in a drainage system, something that it's usually either it's usually something specifically built for green roofs that gets the water off. Water's heavy. Water's heavier than anything else that's going to be up here. So you want to get the bulk of that water off quickly. So you have a drainage system, root mat on top of that, so the roots don't grow in and clog up your drainage system. And there are various. You can have some insulation, and there's some various other things that can be part of that. Often insulation over that root barrier, and then usually another root barrier on top of that. And then your soil. So we mixed our soil up. We put it on top of that, however the depth that we wanted. This concrete building has a pretty high structural weight. It was built to have people on it, built to have plants, built to have soil on it. So we make our mix, and we just put that right in on top of that root barrier above the drainage system, and then planting that, and then we just mulched with the permatil.
Okay. So yeah. Wow, sounds pretty labor intensive and expensive maybe.
It's expensive on the front end.
Yeah.
One of the benefits of the permatil, and one of the reasons it's used in rooftops and just in raised planters, like municipal type large planters, is the permatil won't compact like a soil. You have a planter, and over time the soil level goes down. Well, with this permatil in there, you stay at that. If you have enough permatil, you'll stay at that level. It'll never compact down, even if you're standing on it like me. It won't compact down. Now the other organic matter in there is going to break down, but since the permatil is really hitting each other and the organic matter's in between there, it still doesn't compact. Now you may need, over time, you may need to add some supplemental fertilizer because you're losing that organic matter, but you're keeping the mineral soil and the permatil, which is why you use the permatil and a mineral soil, not permatil and just a compost, because then you'll wind up with almost just permatil over time.
Permatil is available at most garden centers, or?
You can get it in bags as permatil, as vol block, under several different names. If you want a lot of it, you can get it delivered in bulk. I don't know what their minimum delivery is. We usually get tractor trailer loads. You are supporting an NC State grad if you get permatil, and a very good, very, very big supporter of the Arboretum. They have. We do not pay for our permatil.
Yeah.
They have been very generous. Pardon?
It's not available in big boxes.
No. Okay, yeah, you have to go to a good garden center. And like I said, the bags are great if you're doing containers and things like that. But we have taken to mixing it in with pretty much all of our new beds. Asian Valley, where we want a really moist environment, we mixed quite a bit of permatil in with that. We've done it in new beds in the new Plantsman's Woods. We've just found that it helps out any soils. We don't do it in the same quantities as here, but we still do a fair amount.
Has anybody studied the energy savings that
you've garnered from having a rooftop garden?
Not here. There have been a lot of studies starting in the 50s in Germany and then on up through today more here, especially some of the Chicago gardens in Canada, on the energy savings. But since this was not a retrofit, but was built with the green roof, we don't really have data to so that makes it difficult. They've been doing more and more like specialty built buildings where they're doing traditional rooftops and green rooftops side by side, kind of blocking it inside and seeing the savings. And it's generally at a minimum of about 20% savings you get with a green roof.
And you recommend a permatill for planters as well?
Yeah, I mean, it's just great.
Top it off.
If you have a smaller planter that you're doing annuals in, you replace the soil every season or once a year, no, probably not.
Right.
There's probably no reason for it, unless you're trying to grow some specialty plants in it. But if you've got planters where you've got some permanent plants, even if they're going to just be there for 3 or 4 years, if you use a good bit of permatill in there, you'll keep them from compacting.
Okay.
And if you have voles, it's great for voles.
Yeah.
Okay. Next plant is one of the group of woody lilies. Woody lilies are the yuccas, agaves, nolinas, dazzliering, a whole bunch of different ones, but all have this kind of same sort of general habit, but it might be a broad leaf of an agave or a narrow leaf of a dazzliering. Grow in the southwest. Dazzliering Quadrangulatum is a really interesting one. It's, in my mind, one of the prettiest of the dazzliering. Just a mass of real fine foliage comes out, kind of makes a perfect little ball. When it starts young, it's just kind of a little fan out there. If you buy them, mail order, which is generally the only way you can get them, it'll come with 5 or 8 little leaves sticking up the top. Won't look like much, but it can pretty quickly become a sizable plant. And if you look at the base, you'll see that it's got a trunk about this big. This is a trunked plant. Ultimately, it will form a trunk. It'll grow to about 10 feet tall, so you'll have a nice stout trunk with this little perfect round ball of foliage on there. One of the nice things about this particular one is it doesn't have any serrations along the edges like a lot of these types of plants do, and it's kind of an interesting leaf in that you can see why it's called Dazzliering Quadrangulatum. It's got very much a diamond-shaped, four-sided, four-angled leaf. Pass that around. A lot of these are more flat and have a serrate edge on a lot of these. This type of woody lily. So very distinctive, very easy to identify plant. We actually got it under a different name, but realized pretty quickly that it was what it actually was. Sends up a flower spike. The plant can grow to 10 feet. The flower spike can be another 6 or 8 feet or more above that. Kind of a real tight cluster of kind of creamy yellow to buff flowers on there. Interesting. I don't know if showy is the word. It's kind of neat when it flowers, but certainly you're growing it more for its foliage than anything else. Some of the dazzlerians are really nice in containers. This quadrangulatum is a little bit more tender than some. I don't know if it was in a container out in the open, if it would really, if you'd have long-term survival if we had a cold winter. And I mentioned we redid this in 2007. Haven't had a really cold winter since then. We've had some dips where it got cold. We've had some stretches where it stayed fairly cold but didn't get too cold. But when we combine, going from warm temperatures to really cold temperatures and it's staying there for a little bit, we may have a lot of room to do some more planting up here and in our other gardens. So we'll be watching that because one of these days we're going to have a real winter again.
I guess this one hasn't flowered, has it?
This one has not flowered. Haven't seen it flower yet, but it is. When it does, it'll be interesting. It'll be nice from coming over the top of this, but not those large flowers you get on some of the agaves that are really showing.
Just as an aside, the Acanthus, I mean, it's it gets around, not just suckering by seeds.
Right.
It's a question of how long I'll tolerate it, or
Yeah, these are probably ones that will go pretty quickly because it gets to be big and can take over, as opposed to this little plant, the Tetranorus, which you see is seeded on over here, but it's a little more polite in its habit. Won't overtake a lot of plants, and it flowers almost 12 months of the year.
The yellow?
The yellow, yeah. A neat little plant. This yellow plant is called Tetranorus Acanthus. I think
It's not on the list.
Acanthus. It's not on the list.
It's a bonus plant.
I've done it before, you know. It's always had to make those decisions on this one. This one I'm really focused on. You know, some of them are smaller, so I'm only doing 2 yellow daisy flowered plants. Okay. So I said we're going to look at some little plants. Some are little because we're afraid they'll die soon. So that's why we looked at the little dwarf pawpaw. This is one that's little, that we're showing little because it's a little tiny plant, and it's never going to be a great big thing. It's this little Heterotheca jonesii, and this is one of those DYCs, but this is one you can actually identify. So it's not too bad. It's a little kind of cushion or mat forming plant where it grows naturally, which is one spot in Utah where it grows in these sandy pockets on cliff sides. It forms really nice little clumps, nice little cushions, just a couple inches high and a few inches around. What we're finding here with our milder winters, where it grows in the mountains, it gets very cold during the winters. With our more moisture, it's spreading more as a mat than staying as a little bun, which is nice. Be great in a little trough, be great in a little container, or as a miniature ground cover in a very well drained soil. Little tiny silvery leaves, and these kind of silvery fuzzy leaves is an adaptation for growing in very arid environment. It reflects a high light intensity. It reflects a lot of that light. The hairs on the leaves help trap what little moisture there is, keep the air from moving too quickly over it, so it stays there, but also keeps moisture from sitting on the leaves when it does have it. And then you get these little, half-inch or so yellow flowers. Where it's real happy, it'll kind of cover itself with flowers all over. This kind of flowers sporadically. Sometimes it'll flower a little bit in the middle, but more often around the edges. But just a neat little plant you don't find very often. Questions? Thoughts? That one has not been in the ground for very long, so, but it has survived so far. This is one that we really thought that the winter wet would do it in. This area of the rooftop is kind of interesting because when the sun, during the winter, the sun goes low over there, and a lot of this area gets almost no sun during the winter. So if we drop down and it gets cold, this area can freeze and stay frozen for a good bit, which is different from most of the other areas of the garden, where even if it freezes at night, it thaws out pretty quickly. But this can stay frozen for quite a period. So we find that some plants that do well over here won't grow in other areas of the garden, and some plants that do very well in other spots die a quick death over here. So it's good to play around a bit with them.
Hey, Mark. How do you fertilize these type of gardens? Do you use liquid or solid? What frequency?
We fertilize almost none.
That's good.
We do very little we do less fertilizing than we should. Ideally, just in general, we'll do a either a slow release or just a 10-10-10, 10-20-10. The first couple years that a plant is in the ground, and then it's on its own. We'll have some students who come out and they'll do some soil samples in different areas of the garden, get them analyzed, and maybe add some fertilizer, some lime, whatever, to the beds in a few different areas of the arboretum. But we do very little. Where you have red clay, whether it's mixed in with amended soil or you're going straight, red clay is extremely fertile soil. Now, it doesn't drain well, so it can be hard to grow things in, but the fertility of it is fantastic. So we don't have to fertilize a lot to get good growth out of plants here like you do some other areas, especially areas with as high rainfall as we have. But when we do, if we were fertilizing up here, we would add we would do it with a very low rate of probably just a broad spec 10-10-10, 10-20-10 fertilizer up here, and do it very low application rates, because a lot of these xeric plants are slow growing plants. That's one of their adaptations, is they grow slow, and that way they're not throwing out this long growth that when it gets dry gets all crispy like some of our native plants do. They're very kind of what's the word, conservative with their growth. So we don't want to push them too hard. They're growing in naturally pretty sandy soils, soils without a lot of fertility, or soils where there isn't much rain, so even the fertility that's there isn't solubilized, and the plants can't take it up. So they're really not adapted to having high fertility rates, and that can lead to worse winter survivability if we put out too much growth. But in the rest of the garden, again, just a slow release or just a granular application. I always have to be careful in these gardens, because those of y'all that come on my tours know I pet plants, and some of the plants out here don't like to be petted. You see, we got another of the Dazzliering Quadrangulatum, but the one we're going to talk about is this little guy down here, Agave Lefantha. And Agave Lefantha is a really good agave for here for the most part. This is one called Quadricolor, which is a little more tender than the typical Agave Lefantha. Makes a small little rosette, maybe to 24 inches or so would be a very large one, probably more like 14 to 18 inches. Offsets fairly freely, and you can see a couple offsets over here, and there are offsets underneath here, and there's one here. So it offsets pretty well. It is undoubtedly one of the showiest of the variegated agaves, and one of the easiest to grow. But you get this kind of lime green central stripe, a darker green, creamy white around the outside, and then if you look at it closely, you get kind of a, well, these are a little gray, but typically on the new growth, you get kind of burgundy spines right on the outside of that white, which is very, very nice. Doesn't flower very readily like some of the other Agave Lefanthas, but it does offset, which is the only way to propagate this plant. It is, like I said, marginal here. It's really probably a zone 8 plant. We have some protection by the wall here. We have this great drainage, get some protection from cold air movement by the plants around it. But if we have a cold winter, it's going to turn to mush. But great in a container. I know Chris has given us some to distribute, that he's offsets that he's grown from plants in containers, where it offsets real nicely, almost like giant hens and chicks in a container, which is offsets. And you can pop those out and pot them up and give them to friends, and they'll love you for it, because it is a neat plant.
You need one now?
He sometimes gives us ones for the auction, which you are welcome to. You're welcome to get them from the auction. All you gotta do is bid high.
It's a great house plant.
It really is a great house plant. You can go on vacation for a month to Nova Scotia and forget about it and not water it, and it'll be just fine. It really, and agaves are they like sun, obviously, but they'll tolerate pretty dim conditions if they get sun part of the year. So you put them in pots, you move them outside and put them on the deck over the summer. You don't water them too much. You don't have to fertilize them all the time. They're not like trying to grow petunias in containers. They don't look ugly halfway through the summer. They just keep looking great all summer long. They look fantastic. And then you move them inside. You put them in as sunny a spot as you can. But they'll tolerate lower light levels during the winter. You just don't water them. I mean, you can go on, water them a few times over the winter, and that's basically it if they're not getting much light. And then you move them back out. And they get all the photosynthetic reserves they need over the summer when they're out in that blazing sun, and then move them back inside. And so they make great house plants. you know, you got to make sure you have somewhere to move them inside because they do bite. You can go with wire clippers and nip off the tips so you don't, you know, poke your leg out every time you see it, but they still have all the little hook spines along the edges, so you do have to be aware of that. But probably not best if you have toddlers running around the house, but it'll keep your cats away anyway. I love this plant. Question was, is it an annual? And it is not, but if you're familiar with Nurembergia, which is planted as an annual, it's kind of an older fashioned plant, this is a Nurembergia. This is Nurembergia gracilis, a selection called Starry Eyes that was collected down in Argentina. We used to have a lot of it. Problem with it is it flowers so much it just kills itself. It just flowers itself to death. But real fine foliage and these great kind of lavender-eyed flowers in there. Really I think it's just a spectacular plant, and it will make a nice big shrub, but very showy. So short-lived perennial. Okay, the next one I believe maybe came from Charlie. Charlie, was this Aloe cooperi from you?
It was.
It was.
It was from Tony, and then lived at my house a year or so and didn't do that well. Now it's happy.
Now it's happy. This is one from Charlie. We get our plants from all over. We always love when people give us great plants. Aloe cooperi. This is Cooper's grass aloe, or has several names. South African plant, like a lot of the aloes. This is a really nice one. It has proven to be really very hardy. Now, again, we have not had a real winter in recent years, so it's going to get knocked back if we get a really cold spell. But again, we have about 30% permatil here, so we have that great winter drainage. Really deep soil. We mounded these beds up very high. These were installed in 2007, so you know, plants that have been in here are mostly 2007, 2008, on up into more recently. This little aloe has kind of growth. The new growth is blue-green, kind of goes to mint green as it gets older. It has little serrations on there, but since it's a soft plant, those serrations aren't real aren't bad. They don't grab onto you and bite like some. This cooperi is really nice because it stays small and it multiplies quickly. Some of the aloes have trunks, like the Dazzliering we talked about. Those generally don't do well here. This one does. Now, it flowers for a pretty extended period. The old flower stalks were just cut off. With these orange flowers kind of going to yellow and green at the tips. If you look at photos of it in the wild, they range from kind of this color on into a much deeper orange. You know, I don't know if those colors are different parts of its range or if they're widespread throughout. But the hardiest form in the U.S. seems to be this form right now. With that's easily a zone 8 plant, maybe 7B, maybe even warmer. But flowers for a long period. I am told that in South Africa, the flowers and the foliage are considered a delicacy. But I don't know and didn't have time to look up and see how they're prepared, if they're eaten raw, whatever, and I'm not going to try it because sometimes, you know, I don't necessarily trust, you know, some of these things, if you don't cook them, they're toxic, so I don't mind bad taste, but toxic I can do without.
Mark, would that make a good house plant?
Yeah, this would make a great house plant. Yeah, a lot of the aloes do, but this one seems, since it multiplies quickly, I think you get a nice full pot, which would be nice, good, and you know, flowers over an extended period. I think it'd be very nice. My guess is you would need to move it outside and really give it some blazing heat for it to flower.
Okay.
That would be my guess, but I don't know that for sure. Burlandira subacaulus. It's kind of an unusual Burlandira. There's one that's a little more widespread in the trade anywhere, called Burlandira lyrata. This makes a little mounded plant, grow to about 24 inches tall. Has these yellow ray flowers and then kind of a burgundy center with the real fertile flowers are burgundy. If you look carefully at the flower, you'll see the little burgundy flowers and then have those gold anthers on top. So really nice flower color. One of the real reasons people grow this is it smells like chocolate.
It does.
which is nice. Yeah, if you breathe too deeply, you get kind of maybe a little unpleasant note at the end there, but if you do it lightly, it's very nice chocolate. Unpleasant finish, yes. It's like a wine with an unpleasant finish. You just drink it real fast, and you only have a little bit of unpleasantness at the very end. You tell I'm a connoisseur, right? The flowers go from I don't know, that's yeah, go to kind of this green and then brown, and sometimes these are used to as in dried arrangements. The flowers, when they're open, won't last very long, but once they kind of go to this green, they'll last for a pretty good long time as a cut flower. People find them interesting, and even this brown, get them a little bit before this stage, they start falling apart at this stage, but right as they're going to brown, they'll last for a pretty good while. It's native to Florida, sometimes called Florida green eyes, or less charitably, Florida dandelion. But just a neat plant for the sensory garden, you have the smell garden. It's a lot of fun. I worked at a garden where we had an area that was a lot of plants that had great scents, and we had root beer plant that smells like root beer if you smell really hard, and a chorus that smells like licorice, looks just like a regular green leaf chorus, but it smells just like licorice. Had this plant, you know, so we had a lot of fun things like that, and could bring kids out and have them smell different things, which is a lot of fun. But Berlandera subacalis. Okay. One of the benefits for me of doing these talks is I sometimes, you know, with over 5,500 taxa, there are different types of plants out on the grounds. I don't get a chance to look at all of them very carefully, and so we get them in. You know, we get about 1,000 new plants in a year, often from seed. And so I don't always get a chance to really correctly identify them. We get them out with the name that we received them on, and unless they're obviously wrong, we don't get a chance to correct them until later on, until we notice them out in the landscape. Well, this is one I was putting together for the talk. I wanted to talk about the Hypoxis and realized we had the wrong name on it. We had it as Hypoxis multiceps, which grows in the Congo and Malawi and Tanzania. We don't have a lot of plants from that region of the world that do well in central North Carolina. So when I came out and looked at it a little more closely, I realized that was the wrong thing. It's actually Hypoxis Hemorrha Caleda. And we think it's just a very cool plant. It's got these very deeply keeled or folded leaves, like the keel of a boat, kind of sickle shaped, comes out in an arching stem. But it grows, as you go by this and can look at it more carefully, it grows in these kind of 3 planes. It's very, very distinctive. Leaves come out in planes. Yellow flowers, it's just beginning to open for the day. They close up at night and they have green backs. You'll look at it early in the morning, late in the evening, at night. It looks like you say, you know, I'm probably still 2 or 3 days away from it flowering because it's all green, all closed up tight. And then as the sun hits it and it heats up, it starts opening up pretty wide. Sometimes called African starflower. It's also called African potato because there's a corm underneath there that is eaten some. It's pretty widespread, although there is fear that it's going to become endangered in South Africa because it is used medicinally. There's a report that this plant is, if you go to like the markets, this is one of the most widely sold plants in kind of the native markets there. And it's because it's been used for, you know, 1 million different medicinal applications, and I can't name them all. But one of the applications is actually as an immune booster for HIV. Actually, the South African Minister of Health, one of the former South African Ministers of Health, recommended it as a natural, I don't want to say remedy, but as a help. Now, it is apparently toxic as well. So again, it's one of those plants you don't eat. I don't know what kind of preparation there is, but you don't want to eat it raw. But as an ornamental plant, really neat texture, strappy, but with this really distinct shape, upright spikes of flowers that open up to be large, bright gold flowers. Flowers for a very long period. You can see old finished flowers, old flower stalks, and very old flower stalks that, I mean, these are falling off, they're so old. Got new ones just opening up. It's got ones, flower spikes that haven't even started opening yet. It's got ones that are developing still. So really a long flowering plant. Don't know how hardy this will be ultimately. We haven't had much more than 7B winter, but so far it's doing pretty good. You can see it's got a little bit of a rust problem, much like its namesake Hemorrha, a daylily. It's getting that. So I am chalking that up to our fairly wet summer that we've had. That we're seeing more of that than we've had in the past. We'll see if it becomes a bigger problem with this plant or not. Questions? Okay, I absolutely adore this plant. We're not seeing it at its peak right now. It's really heaviest flowering in the spring, but it continues to keep putting out flowers all summer long. It's a skullcap, Scutellaria, and there are a lot of different skullcaps. A lot of native to the U.S., some native to North Carolina. Some get kind of big open woodland shrubs with great big leaves. Some are more little plants like this. They're in the mint family, so you get a little bit of that herby fragrance with them. This is one of the more forgiving plants. You can plant it in ordinary garden soil. You actually can plant it in a little bit of shade, and it will do all right. It makes a tight little mound. This one is one that we've moved several times. It was out in front of the lath house, in the old beds in front of the lath house. We dug it, we moved it, we planted it back out here. Hadn't seemed to miss a beat. I was first introduced to this plant. I saw it at the trials at the University of Georgia, the annual trials, and I got some, and because it was so tidy, you know, it's just a little mound covered with pink flowers when I saw it, and grew it as an annual in my garden. Those of y'all who know me know I always say I'm a lazy gardener, because it's true. And if I plant annuals, I leave them in the ground because I'm not planting pansies during the winter, because you have to deadhead them, and I don't like doing that. And I figured,
ate the plants too, right?
Well, this is pre-plant eating dogs.
Oh, okay.
And so I just let it compost in place. And you know, lo and behold, it stayed semi-evergreen, mostly evergreen, really, all winter long, and flowered again the next year. And you know, 5 years later, it was still growing in the same spot in my garden. It was collected in Mexico by the late Lynn Lowry, who's a great plant collector, and by David Creech. If you know David Creech, he did a sabbatical here with JC. He's down in Texas. They found it, and then it was named by Tony Avent here locally, Texas Rose. This must have been before he really got into, you know, his way out their names, because you'd never know that was a Tony name. But it's just this great little reliable semi-evergreen subshrub, and when it flowers in the spring, it just covers itself in these little tiny snapdragon-like flowers, and then keeps kind of spitting them out all summer long. So great for edging borders, things like that, and will grow in just average garden soil. Does not need specialty soil like we have out here, although it seems very happy here. Questions about this?
Unlike some Scutellarias we have, it's not everywhere.
Right, yeah, some Scutellarias could just go, they are related to mints, and like all families, some are better than others, some members are better than others. This is the more polite mint in the family. It does not go crazy, but will kind of make larger and larger clump. Beautiful little plant. Kind of like, I always think of it like a miniature Salvia Gregii, the autumn sage. All right, without moving much, we're going to go right over here. And here's one of those plants that I have to be careful when I stroke it. This plant kind of has connection with this plant in that one of the discoverers of this plant gave us this plant. This particular plant came to us from David Creech down at Stephen F. Austin University in Nacogdoches, Texas. This is a callistemon, and there are several callistemon we can grow. Woodlander's Hardy over there is one, but this is one that we're finding to be pretty darn hardy for us. It is the smallest leaved callistemon I think around. I think it's the smallest one. It's an Australian plant, kind of upright growing habit. Most of the callistemons are a little bit more widespreading. This one stays more upright. The newest growth is is kind of soft. The older growth gets very prickly. It gets those little needles, those little needle-like leaves, stick straight out. They have a sharp point to them. I guess keep kangaroos off them. But it makes a really nice little open shrub. You say it's nice straight stem. But then one of the real interesting things, and there are not a whole lot of flowers left, but you definitely want to make sure you come up and look at the flowers. They're these flowers that have bright scarlet red stamens topped with, or anthers topped with gold stamens. So you get kind of this two-tone sparkly flower. And when a plant starts flowering heavily, this is just beginning to really flower well, it really is quite showy. Flowers later than most of the other callistemons, so you really get it over the summer, which is nice. Come up pretty easily from seed. You collect the seed, you know, once it's kind of dry and turned into this hard capsule in the plant, you collect the seed and you just throw it in a paper bag and wait for the seed pods to open up naturally and get real fine little seed. Put it on a well-drained propagation media, and it'll come pretty quickly. You can also propagate it by cuttings, but I've had mixed success with that. You want to do pretty soft wood, but kind of have mixed success. Real easy plant. Like a lot of the callistemons, they are, because they're so drought tolerant, and we think everything in Australia is dry. We always put them in dry environments. They do very well in dry environments, but really Australia has a lot of wet spots too. And these really transition well from dry to pretty damp spots in the garden. Now, I don't know with this particular one what that will do to hardiness. If you put it in a wetter spot, I don't know if it will be less hardy or not. But it certainly is proving so far to be pretty hardy in Zone 7. In the time this has been here, we have lost some other callistemon for cold. All right, questions? Okay, you know, we're going all around the world. We have Australia, we have Mexico, we have South Africa, but we do have great dryland type plants here native to the US as well. This is one, Amsonia ciliata, variety tenuifolia, which is the creeping, kind of the threadleaf blue star. Very fine stems, kind of very fine leaves, kind of lax stems. This form, Georgia pancake, is just flat. The typical species, it looks more like a plant that wants to stand up but has trouble, kind of lays down and tips come up. And this thing is just, it is flat. If you're familiar with blue star or Amsonia, you know that it flowers in the spring, comes out, puts out this really nice bright green foliage, flowers with kind of icy blue, pale blue flowers in the spring, which are nice because they sit right on top of the foliage here, and then form these kind of long seed pods, which are nice. Sap sometimes can bother people. It is in the dog bane family, so I may be walking around with a swollen hand tomorrow. Turns the nice gold that a lot of the Amsonias do in the fall, so it's nice that way. You can grow it as kind of a ground cover, or really nice kind of creeping around stems plants that have kind of bare lower stems, or around if you have it in a real dry garden like this, you have it around agaves and yuccas where you have that broad blue foliage surrounded by this really fine bright green foliage. You get more of that contrast, and the blue flowers in the spring look great against those silvery blues of agaves. But real easy plant. There's talk that this may be a new species or subspecies, that it's that distinct, but found in the wild by Bob McCartney of Woodlanders. He's got a great eye for plants.
Does it propagate by seed?
Well, since it is clonal, you typically don't propagate by seed. You do divisions or cuttings. It roots pretty readily from cuttings. We have rooted it before and distributed it. Maybe we need to again.
Yeah.
Cool.
There you go. We'll put it on the list. The state tree of South Carolina. This particular one, the Bald Head Island form, is the northernmost population of sable palmetto in the United States, and grows here, Bald Head Island, North Carolina. And that form has, as you would think, proven to be hardier than the species. The species is it's a zone 8 plant, period. Just does not do well colder than zone 8. This bald head island form, it moves at least into 7B. It's pretty solidly 7B. One of the nice things about palms is the seedlings generally hold the characteristics of the parent plant. So the seedlings from those bald head island sable palmettos retain that hardiness, and this is really probably without a doubt the best true full-blooded sable palmetto for Central North Carolina. There are some other sable palmetto types like sable Birmingham and sable Brazoriensis that do well as well, but of the true sable palmettos, this is the best. Will form a trunk over time, grow up like a typical sable palmetto, so it'll grow to 35, 40 feet over time, ultimately I guess 60 feet, which is about where they top out in their native range. Very bold foliage, has kind of these leaves that can't quite decide whether they're really a palmate leaf like Trachycarpus fortunii, or if they want to be a pinnate leaf like this Butea back here. They have what are called costa palmate leaves, which is where the petiole goes up and kind of becomes the midrib of the leaf, and it's somewhere in between. So what you wind up with are these leaves that want to open up hand-like, but they're kind of twisted like that and elongated thing. The fronds are dissected about a third to halfway back. You get these little filaments coming off the edges of the leaves. Really nice, I think a really handsome palm, really stout, very upright. So even as a young plant, since it is very upright, you can plant around it. You can almost treat it like a tree even from a young age, and then over time it'll go up. Okay, this is another one that we're talking about because we're not 100% sure how long it's going to be here. Cistus are, the rock roses, the cistus are a somewhat fickle bunch. We've had some that have done very well for many years. We have some that die quickly. We have some that do well for many years and then die quickly. They really like, they're from a dry, a drier climate, and they more Mediterranean, which is what they want. But this one I couldn't resist putting on there because it is so showy. It's one called Mickey, and each of these kind of rough leaves, rugose leaves, are kind of edged and speckled with gold over medium green. When it first comes out, very distinctive. It's almost pure gold, and that gold edge gets really distinct from the green. And then over time, it just kind of blends all together. As the leaves get older, you get kind of almost just a chartreuse leaf. Very showy. Makes a low plant, only about 18 or 20 inches tall, about twice as wide if it's very happy. And little white flowers. I shouldn't say little. They're pretty good-sized white flowers, kind of like a single rose, which is why it's called rock rose. There's 5 petals that are opened up on it. On most plants, and they're just a real knockout. On this plant, it's almost an afterthought because the plant is so bright. Cistus can be difficult. They want very well drained soils. They're often ones that do best if you can kind of, like this were planted kind of like this, is kind of tucked up underneath a rock where the root zone area is a little more protected, stays drier. It tends to do even better. But they're both marginally hardy and really hate our winter wet and hate our humidity. So when they do well, we love it. When they don't, we accept it. But we take cuttings of this so we can plant it again because it's such a nice little plant. Questions about this, or rock roses, or dry gardens, or anything else?
You said it was from the Mediterranean?
Mediterranean type climates, yeah. I'm not sure if they're all from the actual Mediterranean. Southern Europe, I think they are. There may be some that spread out a little bit farther, but mostly from the Greece and Italy, those type of areas. Other questions or thoughts?
Hey, Mark, are you headed out on any planned excursions in the near future?
I am. I'm going to China at the end of September to do some plant collecting with another nurseryman from North Carolina, and I was invited out by a gentleman from China who comes here to the Arboretum. He comes to the United States, tries to come once or twice a year, and he will make a collection of plants. Like one time it was Weigela. He just wanted Weigela. One other time it was Lagerstremia, and he comes. This is one of the few places he goes. He kind of based himself in Raleigh, and he'll visit a few other places, but he really comes to the Arboretum. And he's very he's helping fund that trip. Very generous, because we've been generous with him. And then actually I don't know if I'll get to collect plants. I was just invited last week. I got an invitation to speak at the International Association of Botanic Gardens, which will be in China, an area I've never been, Guangzhou in China. So with actually the person who helped find that Scutellaria and gave us the Brachyanders, I think he's the one who put my name in, because he works closely with a lot of Chinese folks over there. And I got the invitation from China, but then almost immediately on the heels of that, I got something from Dr. Creech asking me about saying he wanted to put together a 3 or 4 day package after the trip, after the conference, to go visit some places. So.
Picking up any Chinese yet? You've been there a bit,
You know,
it's tough.
ni hao.
Ni hao.
Hello. Xie xie, thank you. Although whenever I say it, I'm looked at just with blank look, because I obviously am not saying it correctly. Chinese is hard. I've tried, but Chinese is hard. I do know that if you're doing Mandarin, it's ni hao. If you're like in Hong Kong and doing Cantonese, it's ni hao ma. You gotta do it different, Cantonese and Mandarin. So I can say that in 2 different dialects in Chinese, but not
Still
much
look
else.
at you blankly, right?
Yeah, well, no, they're pretty good about that, but anything else, even when I say yuan, for the money, dollars, no. So you say RMB. But I'm trying. Japanese I find much easier than Chinese, and I know about 4 more words in Japanese than in Chinese. All right, well, thank y'all all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Finished up before you got too hot. I hope you guys take a couple more minutes looking around. I skipped some of the showiest things out here to focus on just some things that I thought were really interesting. So you may want to spend a few more minutes looking around. And you can ask Charlie whatever you want. He'll be able to answer it.